So, for the first worst Matrix card, there is Consolidate. And from a design perspective, this card is completely fine. It allows archetypes with a bunch of allies for Matrix. And but the problem is that it's not consistent because it has RNG in itself. And so the main solution I could see work for this card is to increase its cost by 1, so doubling the cost if it is needed, if it becomes too powerful, but I double it, but still will first of all increase its cost, and also double the chances to save our allies, and so actually save all of them. And so that makes the card much more consistent, and that will definitely allow to build a deck around this card, and so that will mean to a much interesting version of the card, and also a more powerful one, hopefully. So, the second worst card for Matrix is Curry Favor, and the problem with this card is that it's not interesting enough. Because gaining food could be actually a pretty good thing in Matrix also, because it can always seduce some other allies from Vespitole or Daramek, and actually the free food for 0 cost would be pretty nice value. But right now that's a very fringe scenario to actually see the card work in that way. And so I would like to keep in the same concept of the card of gaining food, but actually making it more interesting. And so transforming it into a surveillance but for food, and so actually keep the 0 cost, but transforming it into a 3 turn and on turn gain +1 food. So it's always 3 food gained, but into 3 turns instead of 1. And so you could actually think that that would make the card even worse than it is now, because 3 food when you play it is better than the gaining those 3 food over 3 turns. But it's actually not that like this, because yeah, it's definitely true that way, but if you have a card on board with 3 timers, you could always synergize it with, for example, Coordinate, or also even be another card for Coup de Grace. And so that will definitely give the card a more interesting way to play it. If it's still not enough and actually the card will be weaker than it is now, you could then always tweak the number. So for example, make it a 4 turn timer and on turn gain +1 food, or a 2 turn timers and gain +2 food on turn. But that's the main concept I would like to see for the card. So actually transform it into a timer card. Now, the third worst card for Matrix is Coordinate. And the problem with this card is that it has a completely interesting design aspect, but it has a low win rate. And the problem from it, I think it is because it's a very specific card. Because yeah, it synergizes with all Matrix cards, but it only specifically synergizes with the bombs. So it actually reduces only the bombs the timers. And so the solution I would like to see for this card is that it's strange that it synergizes with all the Matrix cards, and so gives them the charges, but only activates the bombs. And so even from a design perspective, it will be completely fine that it activates all of the Matrix cards. And so it will still activate the bombs, as activating the bombs means reducing their timers, but also will activate cards like Subterfuge or Reconnaissance or Surveillance. And so all of those cards which has timers on them would be activated from Coordinate. And so that would definitely make the card more interesting, and so hopefully solve the low win rate problem. So the fourth worst card for Matrix, in my opinion, is Sabotage. And the problem with this card is that it has a low win rate and is not that much interesting. So one way to solve all of those problems is to actually change it to be a lesser arson. So like an arson, but instead of 7 resource lost and attack for 7 minus each lost, instead our opponent loses 3 resources and attack for 3 minus each resource lost. So like an arson, but a weaker one. And that will definitely make the card more interesting, as it is preserved the ability to make our opponent lose 2 resources at attack. If our opponent has exactly 2 resources, the card will be the same, but it also has more possibilities. So for example, if our opponent has more resources, the card will be more resource denial and not attack at all. Or if our opponent is very low on resources, that would translate into 3 attack for 0 gold, which is very nice. And so that could lead to more possibilities for the card, and so hopefully make it more interesting, and or possibly solve also the low win rate problem. Now, the fifth worst card for Matrix is Reconnaissance. And the problem with this card is that it has a low win rate. So one of the solutions I would like for this card to make it work is think about Surveillance. It costs 2 golds and does half of what the Reconnaissance does. So it would be perfectly fine for the Reconnaissance to be double the cost of Surveillance, since it does double the effect of Surveillance. And so reducing the cost of Reconnaissance from 5 gold to 4 would, in my opinion, solve the problem for the low win rate of the card. So, the last worst card from Metris is Charlatan, and the problem with this card is that it has a low win rate. And a way to solve that would be to reduce the charges needed to activate this effect. Because if you leave it be on turn gain +1 charge, that will be fine to actually wait 3 turns to restock 1 more card. But that's not the way Charlatan is usually used, and instead is to gain a bunch of gold and then translate that gold into restocks from Charlatan to buy the stuff from your opponent. But it's not a very good deal, because you're always paying 3 more than your opponent does for the cards you gain. And so changing it to 2 instead of 3 would be perfectly fine in my opinion. Paying 2 more for the cards from your opponent would be much better and would hopefully solve the problem for this low win rate. Now, for Endazu. The best card of Endazu faction is Merchant of Time, which has the highest win rates of all the cards into Endazu faction. And a way to solve this high win rate would, the first change I will suggest is to just row changes into the numbers, and so increase its cost by 1. And so that would mean that you could wait 1 more turn if you are at 0 gold to play it from your bank, and so that would make the card slower and more difficult to obtain, and so that will hopefully solve the problem of the high win rate. The other change I would like to see for the card is to actually rework it a little bit, and so increase its cost by a very big amount, like I thought 4 or 5 would work, but even 6 or 7 if needed, and remove the restriction of the 2 max turns consecutive. And that means that the card will probably be broken. You may think something like that, but it's not that way, because think about it. You have to always redraw the Merchant of Time to go infinite turns. And for that reason you have to buy more than 1 copy to be sure to redraw it every turn. And so that means that you have to pay a bunch and a bunch of gold, and also you need to heal your hero, because if you are at 1 health for the alves the health, if you are at 1 health you can play another Merchant of Time, so you also have to heal yourself. So you have to have a very good economy, redraw always the Merchant of Time, and also your hero. And so that's a very crazy combo to pull off, and for that reason I don't see any problem into a good combo deck. So, for the worst card of Endazu, the first of all is Halting Rebuke. And the problem with this card is that, okay, if you need intercepts, you may search for Halting Rebuke, but it has a very low effect for the cost of the card, and also what you want from your cards even, because if it costs less but has an effect which is not impactful enough, you may not even run that card. And in fact, this card has a very low win rate and also a low use rate. For that reason, I would like to make the card more interesting, and so actually make it cost 0 gold. That will be the first incantation with 0 gold, and also change it from 2 charges of 10 out of 10, instead make it 1 charges out of 5. So the card is free, and so if you want to use it the turn you buy it, it will be a lesser effect and a weaker one instead of the actual version. But it will still gain +2 charges like now, and so if you still need medium interceptors, you could wait for the Halting Rebuke to charge up and even reach 5 out of 5. But the main combo and the one thing that will make the card more interesting is the fact that with Rakdaban you could play the card for 0 gold, and with the Rakdaban effect gain +1 magic. And so that would definitely make the card more interesting for Rakdaban, and more interesting in general. And that would definitely also solve the win rate problem, hopefully. So, the second worst card for Endazu is Poem of Blight. And the problem with this card is that it has a low win rate. And one of the solutions I would like to see for this card to actually make it work is that the card already is pretty good against decks which likes to hoard a bunch of resources, like Suffer Option or something like that. So this is already a counter card for those decks. But for all the other decks, it is not good enough, because when you buy it, it only starts at 1 charge. And so your opponent, when you pass, because you want to increase the charges of the card, when you pass, your opponent sees that you have a Point of Light in hand, and so he would actually play around the card. And so it will spend all of your resources, so that the Point of Light, as the turn passes, loses more and more value each time. So one of the solutions I would like for this card is to increase the initial charges it has when you buy it, and so increase it from 1 to 3. And so that will definitely make the card more impactful against all the other decks which doesn't like to store up a bunch of resources, and also hopefully solve the low win rate problem. So the third worst Endazu card is Warding Circle, and I would like to change its cost from 3 to 4, and also increase the charges gained per magic you put on it from 1 to 2. And because I think that 1 magic is not worth 1 intercept, because magic is the most powerful resource of the game, and I don't think the value of 1 intercept is the same as 1 magic, because for instance you could with that magic heal, and it's true that an intercept is more valuable than the heal, because with the intercept you could also save your allies from the attacks, and instead with healing you could only save your hero. But still, 1 magic does not translate to 1 intercept into value, in my opinion. Instead, 1 magic for 2 intercept would be a very much better deal, and that would definitely make the card more interesting and hopefully solve the low win rate problem this card has. Now, the first worst card for Endazu is Tome of Memory. And the problem with this card is that it really has too much problems. It's really a very bad card, and I don't see any change that could work for this card, if not a completely revision of the card. And I really like the suggestion from the Strangler on the Reddit post, and this change is like that. To change the cost from 1 gold to 2 gold, the starting charges from 3 out of 6 to 2 out of 3, keep the on turn -1 charge, but draw an incantation on turn while removing 1 charge from it. And instead of mid magic plus 3 charges, the feed magic plus 1 charge. So those 2 gold you pay the first time actually translates into 2 draw of incantations, and every magic you then put on the card translates into a draw for an incantation draw. And so that's a very interesting effect, and also a powerful one, in particular with Rakdaban, and so that will be killing 2 birds with 1 stone, and that will definitely solve the low use rate and low win rate for the card. Finally, the last worst card for Endazu, and also the last card for today, is Gilded Warrior. And the problem with this card is that it's perfectly fine as a big hitter when you actually manage to increase the charges on this card, but starting off it does not allow to put pressure as it is when you first buy it. And because it only starts at 1 health and 1 attack per turn. So I would like to solve the problem, the low win rate this card has, by increasing the starting charges this card has. And so it would actually be like a War Rat for Daramek, and start it at 2 charges, so it actually is a War Rat, so starting with 2 health and 2 attack per turn, and then you could always transform into that big hitter, like you always did before, but requiring 1 charge less. And so that will hopefully solve the low win rate problem this card currently has. So that's it for the special for the 10 subscribers. By the way, thank you guys for all the support, the comments, and all the things you do, really. I hope that you find the video interesting, and be sure to leave down below a comment to let me know what you want to see in the next videos. And as always, see ya!